Hey everybody, it's Kat, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Backstory Sessions. I'm joined today by my co-host Matt. Hey Matt.
Hey, Kat. Hey, everyone. How are you?
Well, it's the bittersweet time where we say goodbye to a season.
Yeah, end of season 12, I guess, right?
Yes, it
Yeah, I got
is.
it right.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm surprised. I forget what season it is or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, well, 12 is a dozen, so
yeah,
it's pretty good, I think, that we've made it to that point.
yeah, I guess this is episode like 172 or something like that.
Oh, wow. I know we're like very close to 65,000, if not. So a lot of milestones there, almost 175 episodes and season 12. It's,
Yeah,
you know, very nostalgic in a way.
sure.
But I mean, here we are, and it's a good accomplishment that we've done, and I feel very happy that we have persevered and got this many episodes, and this we've told this many backstories. We had a lot of amazing guests over the years,
No, yeah, for sure.
and we never anticipated that when we started, and it's just kind of grown and morphed into its own path, I guess.
Yep, and we're still very big in Ghana.
And I am very appreciative of that, and I hope we pick up some more countries to fall in love with the podcast too.
Yeah, well, I do have to say that, this month in July, anyway, England has sort of come back and, they're battling it out with Ghana.
Well, I love both of them, so it's just gonna be battle on because, tell your friends, get them to, help you win.
There you go.
It's when they win, we win. It's all win-win
Yeah.
or
So,
win-win.
yeah. So this week we have an interesting guest.
Yes, we do. Kent Blazy, who we've had before, but he has a new project out, and we love talking to him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what he's up to.
Yes. I'm really curious, well, first of all, he has a connection, really, kind of an odd connection to both of us
Yeah.
in that, he grew up a lot of his life. He grew up in Lexington, Kentucky.
Hmm.
So, well, you lived very close to there for a while. You, I've been in Kentucky longer than any other state at this point. And, then Buddy grew up before Kentucky in New York, very close, I think, to where you did.
Yeah, it's about an hour away. He was over there in Woodstock. It's kind of an interesting place on the other side of the Hudson River from where I was. So,
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
Yeah. So I think it's probably the first guest that we've had that had that connection, to be from both places really. I mean, that's almost an hour from me and an hour from where you grew up. So
Hmm.
kind of, I mean, we find really strange things cool, I guess. But
It's
I don't
always
know.
it's always interesting to talk to someone who's from, my neck of the woods or your neck of the woods or whatever, because it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, or.
Yeah, we did not get to go to Woodstock.
No,
We don't
no.
that.
Yeah, we don't have that experience. I think I was 7 at the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised you didn't sneak off to go, but
I don't even remember ever hearing about it or, I mean, I think I saw it on the news after it happened, but I didn't really pay attention to it. So,
Yeah, I didn't know about it. Still, I don't even know when's the first time I heard of it, but I think, not at the time for sure.
yeah, it's always been sort of like I've heard about it a million times through my past, and of course they had Woodstock in 90 something. Uh, and then wasn't there a third one? I forget.
Yeah, not too long ago, I think, just a few years or something.
Yeah, trying to capture the spirit of the first one, and I think like the second one ended up with like there was some rioting going on and burning of equipment, destroying the
Yeah,
stage.
Detroit. Yeah, that's what I think too. I think that was right.
Yeah,
So,
and it's probably people that I know who were there, but that was not one place I wanted to go. So,
yeah. Well, you can't really something becomes iconic for a reason, and it's really hard. I mean, you can have like reunions or, a special commemorative show or whatever to try to celebrate the 50th year or, whatever
right,
year, but it's just really never the same, I think,
usually not.
at all.
Yeah, it's like sequels to a movie. The sequel is usually never as good as the original. I mean,
That's very true.
it's
And I was about it with actors too. You get used to someone playing a role or something, and then if you were to see it again and someone else, it's just, I don't know, some things define whatever they are, and
mhm.
it just ever be the same again.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think Woodstock is just one of those.
Well,
I mean,
it, it would have been cool to be there, I guess. Maybe not the second one, but certainly the first one.
yeah, I mean, because so many rock, so many music people, period, were there that maybe were not, iconic at that time. I mean, a lot were, but some people that played there, you know, were not the same. Like hearing that they were there is not the same as hearing that they were there, now or whatever.
Right, yeah.
So I'm sure it was a wild time, and I don't know if it was hot, but it probably was.
Yeah,
And
as I recall, it was pretty hot and rainy and, a lot of mud and, you know, I'm sure I'm sure it was interesting.
well, I'm not about the heat, so I'm gonna say probably I would have had enough after, yeah,
Day one.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, probably,
Hmm.
or I'd have to be out at the night time or something. But I don't know. I mean, camping, like the whole thing of being just outdoors, and you know, it's just really not for me. Like I like to go outdoors and see nature, but then I want to come back into,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
an inside.
Yeah, because there's
Uh,
bugs and animals and hot weather
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. So it's very interesting, but yay for Woodstock, and yay for Kent Blazy too, to have that connection, because Lexington is a very lovely place too. So with horses and the bluegrass and the
Yep.
whole thing. So
Whiskey.
it's just really, yeah, bourbon for sure.
Yeah,
And
bourbon. Sorry.
yeah, well, I mean, there's whiskey as well. So,
Yeah.
but bourbon is the thing, I guess, the bourbon trail. But still, it's just it's nice that there's like that connection that we have with the guests. So we've like rambled a long time about that.
As we were, as we do.
Yes, but It's nice to look back, and since we are like closing out a season, it's only natural we would be reflective, I think.
All right, so we are coming back. What date did we say?
I believe we're coming back on August the 11th.
Your boy, I get a few weeks off. Awesome.
Yeah, so you know, it's it's a needed break because we work very hard on the podcast when we are recording.
Hmm.
And, it takes a lot of time to find guests, book guests, record guests, and then the
Promote.
technical
Yeah.
of all that, and just to get the episode up and going, promote it, and all of
Hmm.
that. So it's good to have a little break, but I always miss it too. I always like hate when it's the last episode of the season
But I
a
mean,
little bit.
it's not really a break. I mean, we call it a break, but it's not because I mean we have other things that we're doing. I mean, I have my regular job and all the fun that goes on there, and then you have mystery meets, and I know you're
All the fun that goes on there.
right. Yeah. So I mean, the podcast is just another thing that we do, and we're taking a break from that, but not from all the other stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, maybe maybe we should like say with the podcast and take a break from like try that seasons.
Yeah, I don't know how my boss would feel about that one. Hey, I'm taking
Yeah.
a few weeks off.
Awesome. See
Yeah,
ya
yeah,
August the 11th.
yeah, that'd go over really well.
And thinking, no, you won't.
Yeah, I have a trip to Pittsburgh scheduled for something that I'm doing for work, and I can't miss that. So,
No, that reminds me. There's a lot of cool concerts because I can't remember who exactly was going to be around Pittsburgh, but it was somebody I actually had wanted to see. But anyways, a lot of cool concerts are.
yeah, I don't think I'll have time for that. So,
Yeah,
and I'll be probably 45 minutes away from Pittsburgh, I guess. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, who knows? There could be like a Woodstock breakout wherever you are.
yeah.
Like wherever the people want music, they just like find a field and
Yeah, somehow I don't think it works that way. There's probably some regulations. Uh,
regulation, regulations. Who cares?
that's right.
We're gonna do what we want to do at age 60.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think though, like how much easier. I mean, can you imagine? Because like when you were 7, like there was not Facebook and social media and all of that.
All right.
So getting the word out that there was going to be this huge concert was a lot harder, I imagine, than it would be now, where you could just go on social media and
Well,
send the location and everything else.
yeah, I mean, I guess they had promoted it and they were expecting, I don't know, 40,000 people, and they ended up with like 250,000. And,
Yeah,
you know,
promotion had to go like extremely well.
it was all word of mouth, I believe,
Yeah, I mean,
which is sort of unheard
great.
of now. I mean, just getting people to talk to each other about anything is, kind of hard. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, we did that episode with Jeff Rasley about hitchhiking too,
right.
and I imagine that like a lot of people just started out carefree, two or three people in their car, and then passed and picked somebody else or two or a
Yep.
couple more, whatever. We're going to Woodstock. All right, sounds good. I mean,
Yeah.
we're young and foolish.
Yeah. Anybody want to go
Or
to Woodstock? Sure.
yeah. I mean, like you might not even know if you're at Woodstock or not, but it
True.
seems like, I mean, really, if you think about just that aspect of it, like that's really pretty impressive with the lack of communication. Like you can't just send out, okay, this is the location. I'm gonna text it to you now or share it with you now, like we have it so good in that way.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but when technology goes down, you
we're all
know, it's
screwed.
like you're lost. It's like,
Yeah.
now what?
Yeah. It's not like you're going to send a letter. I mean, who has paper?
I do send a card,
Oh, yeah,
for
true. Yeah.
birthdays, but interestingly, I use so this is kind of funny. I mean, I order it usually, and so I don't get to ride in it or anything,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, true.
I mean,
The thought that
it's a
counts.
yeah, it is a thought, but I used to like I had a pen pal and everything. Like I was hardcore, sending letters and stuff. I was good at that.
Where did your
And now
pen pal live?
I had different ones, like I guess it was probably like Tiger Beat or, those teen magazines or whatever.
Right.
It would have a little section where you could like, get your sea monkeys or
Oh,
whatever,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you get pen pals. So, I just like write because you had to write to even get the pen pal, and so they would match you up, with how many ever and I had some that would actually write back, for I didn't have anybody that was like, years and years, but a few people that probably lasted 5 or 6 months. Seemed
Wow.
like a long then, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like even then there wasn't social media, but there were still like people that were a little bit off of the beaten path, so to speak. So I get letters and they'd be just like some people would be really characters, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, you can tell a lot about a person by their writing. So maybe it was like the beginning of, it was like foreshadowing what was to come for me teaching English for kids.
Yeah. All righty.
Yeah, I should have just like given up then.
Yeah, yeah. Had you only known.
Well, so Kent Blazy, we have had a lot of songwriters this season, and this album in particular, I think, is interesting. Even before we talk to him about it, I have a lot of questions. But this is about his life,
Yep.
and it, of course, the first thing that I was thinking is, if I was looking back over my life, who would I pick out to write songs for?
Hmm.
So, like if you go back to your 20s or, I mean, like where would it start for you? Like, you know, the the person that you think you might write a song for, like, is it your family? Like somebody, what chapter of life does it start that you feel inspired,
Oh,
and
you're
right?
asking me? What?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
you have to like look back and think who's inspiring a song, good or bad.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I barely remember much before I turned like, I don't know, 13. So, I mean, probably someone around then.
Yeah, I would say that's like when you start feeling more, I don't know, independent, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be like my first grade teacher or whatever. I don't even remember who that was.
Well, if like that one guest we had, that the teacher told him early on,
Yeah.
he could don't be an actor, don't be an astronaut. So you're not going to be an astronaut. So
Right.
yeah. So if you had an experience like that, you probably would remember.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, like, I can't remember much about when I was a lot younger. So.
Yeah, I mean, some people, I find it interesting. Some people always say like they can remember like being born, like
Yeah.
they're when they're 1 year old or something. But that's not for me. Like I don't really have memories like that either.
I mean, I can remember some things, just like, little things. I was, probably 2 or 3 when Kennedy was assassinated, and I remember watching the funeral. Excuse me, watching the funeral on TV. At least I think it was that. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I was alive, but if I was,
yeah.
mean, I was just like barely alive.
hmm And then
But
like the moon landing. I mean, that was what, 69, I think. I don't remember.
yes, my mom now tried to get me to watch that on the black and white TV, and I had no interest in that. And she
Right.
was
Yeah.
like trying so hard to get me to watch.
Yeah. I don't remember if I watched it or not. I mean, I might have seen it on the news, but yeah, I don't remember if I watched it or
Well, another thing she tried to get me to watch is the Watergate. She
uh,
watched, it seemed like a whole summer or whatever,
yeah.
like it on. And she'd always be like trying to get me to, I had no interest in that either.
Yeah,
So,
like the OJ trial.
yeah, I know I was teaching during that time. So, I didn't get to watch it because I was working, but I was at school and tuned in. It was my break period or whatever. And, when the verdict came back. So,
Hmm.
I at least I did have an interest in the verdict, and seeing how it's going to turn out. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just weird the things that, you know, you try to think about why you were interested or not interested. And I think at a different age, you
Yeah.
might have been.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, like, there's a lot of things like the moon landing. Had I known it was so significant, I mean, I probably would have watched it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I was probably at that time playing with paper dolls and making my own stories up. It's like,
hmm
so, anyways. Well, we probably have no countries left listening to us now because like they didn't do anything historical.
right.
I mean, have you like is there anything that you do remember like watching or participating in that? I did go to the World's Fair, so I have done that. So,
hmm
you know, that was, I mean, it's something to say that is a part of history of.
Yeah. I mean, are you asking me if I've done anything like that? I don't.
Yeah, like we've talked about things we didn't really do or
Yeah, no, nothing that I can think of.
yeah, well, there's still time, stuff's happening all the time.
That is true.
And now you can find it on social media.
Well, let's go find Kent Blazy and talk to him.
Yeah, let's, find out like all the historical things that he's done and really just who he has chosen. There's 11 songs, I believe. So let's find out who those special people are.
All righty, sounds good.
Well, Kent Blazy, I want to welcome you back to Backstory Sessions. It's been a while.
It has been a while, been too long.
Well, I had no idea that you were going to have a new album coming out. So,
I
um,
didn't have any idea I was having a new album coming out either.
okay, so I'll bite. How did it happen?
Well, I just put out that From the Beatles to the Bluebird last year, like July, and I thought, well,
Right.
that'll run me for a while. And then I had two people that were pretty important in my early 20s pass away last year. And so I kind of wrote a song honoring each of them. And before I knew it, I kind of had a whole album of songs that were kind of what I've been through since I started playing music. And it was kind of interesting. And it was one of those things where I really didn't want to do it, but they just kept pounding on my head to write them, and it's like, okay, y'all want to come out? Come on.
I mean, is it kind of like you get in that frame of mind of, writing sort of tributes, I guess, or songs inspired by people, and then they just all want to come out?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It kind of made me look at some different things in my life and how far I've come from there and how I got to where I am. And before I knew it, I was just kind of almost like channeling these things, and I was kind of wondering, well, do I have a record or what? And Lee Francis, who is my bass player and leader of the band and does all the charts, he plays bass for John Party. And when I could track him down and get with him, I played him these songs, and he said, "These are great. You need to record them." So that's what we did. We went into Sound Emporium and cut 10 of them in one day.
Wow. Well, My Life So Far is the title. So, are the people that you wrote these songs for from all different time periods in your life?
Well, the main two that started it was the first girl that I really was in love with in Lexington, and people thought we would get married. And we dated for a couple of years, and she was like my biggest fan and encouraged my music. But then she wanted to have some babies and have a little farm, and I just knew if I settled down or did something like that, I wouldn't be able to pursue my music and be out on the road or do whatever I needed to do if I had to take care of kids. And so I told her I just wasn't ready, and I introduced her to a friend of mine, and they ended up getting married. And I ran into her 3 or 4 years later after I'd moved to Nashville, and she had two beautiful little children with her, and I had a song that had just hit top 5 in the country. And I thought, well, we both kind of got what we wanted, so that was better than not doing what we knew we had to do for both of us.
Wow. Well, I mean, in a way, that's a bittersweet story.
Yeah, and it's all true. And then the other guy that I wrote a song about, he and I met like when we were in maybe third grade or something, and I was the fastest kid in the school when it came to running, and he moved in from California, and he beat me the first time we had a race. And and then
Oh, no.
yeah, so you either gonna be friends with him or not like him. But we found out we were born one day apart, and we just were like brothers, and we went to Woodstock Pop Festival together and came back and went to college and started a band. And we had a great band. It was a 4-piece band. Everybody could play and sing. And we had a real big show to do. And I, I found out that he'd moved to LA that day with his girlfriend and didn't tell anybody.
Wow.
So that kind of that was kind of the end of that band. It was never the same because it'd be like the Beatles having somebody other than the four Beatles. It just changed the chemistry. No matter what you did, you couldn't replace him. And I always thought he was the most talented person, and he would never come down to Nashville, Tennessee or anything. And he ended up playing his whole life in smoky bars back in Lexington. But I guess he was a big fish in a little pond and was happy with that. But we just kind of fell out of communication. And but when I heard that he passed away, it kind of hit me, I need to write a song about him because he's a big part of my life. So those two people kind of started the whole record going. And from there, I just started looking at different things. And the next song I wrote was Feeling Alive Again. And my first wife had passed away in 2009 from a brain tumor. And it was kind of a song about coming back from that and getting back into nature and finding myself again and finding out what I wanted to do. And so that was the third one. And before I knew it, I had all these songs.
Wow. Did you like, how does, I guess it, as you're looking back over your life and writing about people and experiences and memories, and then, to have the loss of the two passing away, you know, d- did it cause you to figure out anything about life, like your life so far?
I would say my life so far has been pretty darn lucky.
Yeah.
I was reading an article about Richie Sambora, who played with Bon Jovi, and I guess they had some kind of documentary come out that he wasn't really happy with. And he said, I'm just really full of gratitude for where I am right now, no matter what I've been through and what anybody else says. And I thought, yeah, that's gratitude. That's the place to live. And I've got a new wife, and some of those songs on the album are about her. She's a big inspiration. She's a big joy. And so they came out pretty easy. And a couple of them were about us meeting and getting together. And then one was about a dog we rescued. And so it was just kind of pointing a pen at different parts of my life and saying, I want to write a song about that, how I feel about this or about that. And then a couple of them are about the music business. I had a preacher in Lexington, Kentucky when I was growing up. When he found out I was going to play guitar, he kind of told me I was going to hell. And so it's kind of a story about him. And at first I thought he was right, because the first gig I ever played with a band was in a stripper bar. And I thought, boy, I've got nowhere to go but up from here. And, and then there's another one on there about kind of what I've witnessed about the music business, how it can get really talented dreamers in there and kind of chew them up and spit them out. And some of the most talented people that I know have never really made it big. And then people that I know have made it big, and they're still trying to get their money from the record labels. And it's even worse now with Spotify and all that. I saw where Snoop Dogg said he'd had 1 billion plays on Spotify and made $45,000.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, you know, trying to relate to that world. And then there's another song on there that kind of started out being a sad song about, after my wife passed away, about Empty House is the name of it, about how you come home and there's nobody there and nothing there. And I thought, well, that's too sad a song. So I started thinking, what would Buddy Guy do on it? And turned it into a blues song. And then I'd been listening to this record, the Yardbirds. They had an album called Rave Up with the Yardbirds, and they had Jeff Beck in the band, and I think Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton had just left, and just a phenomenal band. But they would play like one song, and then they would just jam out for like 30 minutes or whatever. And so I said to the guys, when we get to this end of the song, let's just pretend like we're the Yardbirds. And so we just kind of went crazy for about 3 minutes at the end of the song. And I don't think anybody in Nashville ever recorded anything like that day.
Have you ever written a song for someone and they didn't like it, or asked you
That's
not
probably
to?
9/10 of the time.
Wow.
No, yeah, I mean, sometimes, like, well, there's one song that's on the album that's called I Can't Sleep. And it's basically about when you're out on the road, or the person that you usually sleep with is they're out on the road or whatever. And it's, I can't sleep when I can't sleep with you. And I wrote it about my wife. And she said, well, you're not going to put that on the record, are you? And I said, well, maybe. And she wasn't real happy about that. But then I had Lee Francis over here charting the songs with me, and that was one that we were charting. And she came in and said, you're not going to record that song, are you? And Lee said, hey, I'm out on the road with John Party. I'm missing my wife all the time when I'm gone. And this song is exactly how I feel. And so she said, all right, well, y'all just go ahead and record it then, but you can't play it live.
I mean, so it seems kind of sweet, I think. You
Well,
know,
yeah, I thought it was too, but you just never know. And
yeah. I mean, so did you see her side of it at all, of how, how she might not want that to be a song for you?
yeah, I think she thought, well, it may be a little too much information for people. But I really think it's probably every couple who one of them has to be away from the other person. And Lee definitely jumped all over that. And the other guys in the band too, they're out on the road with John Party too. And they're like, yeah, this is how it's like, when we're gone, we miss everybody. And so she kind of warmed up to it as long as I don't play it live while she's in the audience.
Yeah, I can imagine like military families and, a lot of people are away from their person could relate to that.
Well, you exactly hit the nail on the head, and somebody actually told me that this morning. Military people would love hearing this song because that's how it is. You're gone for a long period of time, and boy, if you're in the military and you're over there sleeping in the desert where it's just dirt and grit and everything else, you're really wishing you're at home sleeping with whoever it is.
Sure. Wow. Well, let's go through some of these tracks. And I know you've touched on some of the stories already. One Big Love. So, is that the first person that you loved?
That was actually for my new wife.
Okay.
It's just a celebration being with her every day. And I wanted to let her know that all the little things she does that seem so inconsequential just add up to everything that you love about her. So that
Well,
one she was really happy about. She likes it when I play that one.
yeah. Are you play? So today's her birthday, or you're
Her
celebrating?
birthday. Yeah, well, actually, tomorrow's her birthday, but she's flying to Washington, D.C. So we're having her and her sister over for dinner tonight and kind of celebrate it early.
Well, that'd be a great time to play that song too.
That's
Um,
right. Well, I was kind of playing it for her yesterday, and she was smiling about it, so that's a good thing. And I did
yeah.
back-to-back shows at the Bluebird Friday and Saturday night with my band, and she came Friday night, and I played it, and she was smiling, so that's good.
Yeah. And as a songwriter, that must be the ultimate thing to know that your goal of making people, whether, feel whatever it is, was achieved. That must be really meaningful to you.
Well, it really is, and that's always my target. Music is meant to move people one way or the other, to make them smile, to make them cry, to make them be in gratitude for their life, or try to get their life to be better. There's so many different ways that music can change people, and so when I'm writing, I'm very conscious of that, of how's this going to relate to people. And the cool thing is, on this record, most of it's so personal, but everybody who's been listening to it says this is just real, this is real life. And you've touched on so many things that everybody can identify with. And so that really wasn't even my target at the beginning. I was just writing what I had to write, but it was good to get that kind of feedback from people.
Well, feeling alive again, you told us was, about coming back to, I guess, living after the death of your first wife. What helped you? Like how was the healing process to get to that point?
Well, once again, it was music. After she passed away, I started writing songs for a new record. This was back in 2009, and it was called Play Guitar. And a lot of that was dealing with that and what other people had been going through. And so that helped me by writing those songs. And then I've always found that nature is a good place to go. And I'm lucky enough that I have a little park near us that has a lake, and I had a golden retriever at the time, and we would go out there and every day, and we would just walk, and I would just kind of either let things go, or draw things in and think about what had happened. And it's like, where do I go from here? What else is possible now? It's kind of like, in a way, I've got a new life. I have to reinvent myself. And so it was funny. I had always been a person that liked to play electric guitar and play in bands and stuff like that. And when you move to Nashville, you kind of get where you're playing acoustic guitars most of the time. And I was meditating one day after she passed away, and I heard "Start a Band," kind of like Kevin Costner, if they build it, it'll come. And so I went, well, what is that? And I mean, like 3 or 4 days in a row, I just heard "Start a Band." So I had a friend of mine who was a bass player in Lexington, Kentucky, that we kind of grew up together, and he became a big session guitar player here and bass player. And so we would walk out there sometimes. And I said, hey, if I start a band, will you play in a band with me? And he's like, what are you talking about? He said, I'm a studio musician. I don't play out live anymore. So I started working on him for like 6 months, and finally I had a drummer and I had another guitar player, and I said, look, if I just go find bass equipment that's for stage and set it up, will you just come play one gig with me? And he said, all right, I'll go do that. So he stayed 10 years. So I think he liked it once he started, because there's something different about music live, you know? And so that band kind of got me going too, you know, it gave me another outlet. And electric guitar is so good for an emotional outlet. And we had a really great club that we played at all the time. And, you know, I got to do whatever I want. I did a lot of cover tunes that I love, but I did a lot of stuff that I've had recorded. And I would have different artists come in and sit in and do a set. And it was just very therapeutic to be able to start doing that.
Well, who really rescued who? That is an interesting title. And of course, it engages your mind right off to wonder, like, what is this about? And, what is the answer? So, what is the answer?
Well, usually it works both ways, and that's how it was with the woman that I'm married to now. I knew she had been divorced, and she'd been divorced for like 10 years, and I had known her for a while, and I knew she's like, I'm never getting married again. And after what I went through, I was like, well, I'm never getting married again. So we were friends, we became friends, and then the next thing I knew, we were starting to date each other, and we were both like, no, I don't want to get married. No, I don't. We'll be bohemians, you know. And so uh, then it just got to the point where we wanted to spend the rest of our lives with each other. And so it was one of those things of, I was coming from a hurting situation, she was coming from a hurting situation, so we basically rescued each other. And then had this golden doodle that kind of had gotten me through after my wife died, and he passed away. And my new wife kept saying, I'm going to find you another doodle somewhere. And so we were living in Santa Fe, and she found me a doodle in Murfreesboro, Tennessee on Craigslist, if you can believe that.
Wow.
So we flew in to Nashville and drove to Murfreesboro, Tennessee to meet this little doodle who was 7 months old and looked like an Ewok. And she had no food, she had no bed, she had no leash, she'd never been walked, the whole bit. And so I was kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to get this dog or whatever. And my wife said, just get her in the truck. If we don't keep her, we'll find her a home. And so we brought her home and we got her all groomed up, and she looked like a totally different dog, and she just stole our hearts away, you know. And so we rescued her, she rescued us. So it works
Oh,
both ways.
oh, that is a very sweet story. This song's for you.
That was the one about the guy who beat me in the foot race that we ended up being in a band together. And it's just, I wanted to write him a song, and I figured, there's probably 100 songs called This Song's for You, and there's probably 100 songs called This One's for You. So I called it two things so nobody would get them mixed up with other song. But it was a song for him, you know, just telling the story of what it was really like while we were together, and the good times we had and what all we did. And, looking back, I just always thought he was the real talented one. And I just always felt honored to be able to play with him. But it just didn't work out that we were going to be doing it together.
Yeah. Well, still my only child.
Okay, so that's the one about my first love. And she wanted to have babies and have a little farm and all that. And everybody thought we were going to get married. And I just realized if I was going to pursue my music, I couldn't be tied down by having babies and having to take care of a farm and all that. And she was my biggest fan, but she needed what she needed, and I knew I had to pursue what I wanted to do. So we broke up, and I introduced her to a friend of mine, and they ended up getting married, having babies, and having a farm. So she got what she wanted, and I ended up being a successful songwriter. So we both got what we wanted by choosing for us rather than going, well, okay, I'll go ahead and do this. Or, I didn't really want her having to be chasing around the country with me. So if she wanted a little farm, that's where she needed to be. And I respected that, and it worked out for both of us.
So then, like by the title, are you saying that music is your child?
Well, I think the old joke is the little boy comes to his mom and says, I want to be a musician when I grow up. And she says, honey, you can't do both. And so that's, I mean, sometimes I still feel like when I'm playing guitar in the band or something that I'm that 16-year-old kid again. But it's like I never wanted kids. And so I'm basically still my only child. But I have two stepchildren from the different marriages, but I'm still my only child.
Interesting. Well, the devil's music, I'm guessing that one might be the one related to the preacher.
Yeah, it was funny because I was telling my wife she grew up Baptist in Louisiana, and her dad was a minister. And so I was telling her about this minister that told me I was going to go to hell if I played music. And she said, what church did you go to? And I said, well, it's a Christian church. And said, I think he was more of a Baptist minister than a Christian minister. And he just had his way of looking at things. And I guess he was trying to look out for my best interest. But in the long run, I knew from the time I picked up a guitar what I wanted to do. And so that was the thing of just kind of going, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do for me. And, you know, he never was real happy for what I chose to do, even when I became successful. But, you know, he had his vision and I had mine.
Has he got to hear this song or
No, I think he probably passed away about 20 years ago.
yeah.
So maybe somewhere he's listening to it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
never know.
Yes, hopefully, not with the devil and this
Right.
song. Yeah. Nature of the Beast, is that the music business and is
Yeah,
that what
that's
that's
definitely
about?
about the music business and what I've seen, and also what I heard. It's been going on as long as there's been the music business. I mean, you think of Stephen Foster, who's a big influence on me. He got all his copyrights stolen because they really weren't copyrights back then, and so he died penniless, even though he wrote all these songs that people still record today. Like "Hard Times Come Again No More." Bruce Springsteen just did that a couple of years ago, but for Stephen Foster, he died penniless. And then you hear all these stories about Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters and all these black guys during the 50s where they never got paid by the record label. They just would buy them a Cadillac, and that was supposed to keep them happy. And then I've seen, even in Nashville, there'll be somebody that they'll sign and they won't ever do anything with them because they've got another act that's pretty close to what that act is, and they really have more money invested in the other act, so they just kind of sit on the other person and never get their career off the ground, but don't let them go pursue something else. So it's a strange business, and now it's even more so because the record labels are in with Spotify and all that kind of stuff, and so we barely get paid for what we do. And the other thing is, I thought it was a conspiracy when they quit making CDs in 2016, and then in 2017 you couldn't get one in a car anymore, but you got 3 free months of streaming if you bought a new car. So what are you supposed to do with these thousands of CDs that you have if you buy a new car? And it's just kind of interesting that's how songwriters got paid. Like if the three of us wrote a George Strait song, every time a CD got sold, we would make some mechanical money on it. It may be 3 cents or whatever, but if it's George Strait, it's going to add up. And so
Right.
that's how young songwriters got paid that way. When you came to town, you would get a publishing deal, but what it would basically be is like a bank loan or a draw is what they call it, where you would write for them and they would pay you. But then when you had songs recorded and the mechanical money came in, that's how you got paid, and that's how you paid them back. And so when they quit having mechanicals after CDs disappeared, I don't know how a young songwriter would come to town these days and get by and make a living. Thank God, I guess there's Uber. for them to be drivers or something. I don't know, but it's a
Yeah.
whole different world than it was, 10 years ago.
Well, and then you have Empty House.
Right. And that's the one that started out just as a sad old song, but I just decided I was going to turn it into a kind of funny, fun blues song. And, it's funny. I've had 4 or 5 different people get in touch with me after they heard this song and said, "That's my song. I got home one day and my wife moved all the furniture out, and the only thing that was in the house was a cat, and another guy said I came home everything was gone, and I walked in and boy, I could hear my footsteps just echoing. And so you nailed it on that song. And then that's the one I decided we're going to go crazy on the end and just do a Yardbirds kind of thing, a little nod to one of my favorite bands back then. And, I just like the way it turned out. It's very unexpected. And like I said, I don't think anybody was recording anything like that day in Nashville.
Interesting. And then you have the only one that you co-wrote, I guess,
Right.
for A Minute There.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wrote that with this guy that I'm hoping he's going to have a career in the music business. He's really worked hard, but his name's Garth Brooks.
Yeah, but maybe we can have him on the podcast,
Well, he needs all the help he can get. So it was interesting. I wrote a song after my dad died called For a Minute There, and I sent it to him, and he said, "I love this idea, but I want to write it about my dad after my mother died because he basically died when she died. He just kept living." And so I flew out to Oklahoma and we wrote this song, and he put it on an album called Lost Sessions that kind of got lost. And but it was cool because Alison Krauss sang the harmony and played fiddle on it and stuff. But it just kind of was one of those sleeper songs that disappeared. And oh, about 10 years ago, I got email from this guy who lives in Brazil who's Portuguese, and he wanted me to help him translate If Tomorrow Never Comes into Portuguese. So we spent about 3 months going back and forth trying to get If Tomorrow Never Comes work from English into Portuguese. And I guess we got pretty close because he ended up recording it and putting it out in Brazil. And then he sent me the track of it and said, "Will you put your voice on it? I want to do a duet with you." So I did that. And so we just kind of kept in contact. And about a year ago, he sent me a track that he had done in Portuguese of For a Minute There. And I loved what he had done. And he did the same thing. He sent me the track and he said, "Will you put your voice on this? I want to do a duet with you, but I want you to do it by yourself." So I did it, and I really loved the way these Brazilian musicians played that song, and they did a great job of the arrangement and everything else. So after Empty House, I thought I needed something to bring it back around to a different attitude. And so that song ended up being on the record. It came in almost at the perfect time to be the completion of the whole record.
Wow. That is a really cool story.
Yeah, I've never met the guy. I've never talked to him. We just email, but he loves what Garth and I do.
What did Garth think about it?
He loved it. He was really surprised. I sent him it when I got it done, and he was just raving about it. And that's pretty good coming from him.
Yeah. Matt, what do you have to say about all these stories? There's a lot.
Yeah, there's certainly it's pretty cool. I just wanted to ask you about one thing that you said in passing. You had said that you went to Woodstock, is that true?
Yeah, I did. This guy that I ended up being in the band with, he and I and one other guy flew from Lexington, Kentucky to New York City. I had never been on a plane, and we took a bus and we went to this little town. It really wasn't in Woodstock, but it was in Bethel, New York, about 60 miles away. And we took a bus, and there were so many people there by the time we got there, which was Friday morning, and it wasn't going to start till Friday afternoon or Friday night. But we got out, and there was like a little convenience store, and all they had left was one 6-pack of beer and some Cheetos or something. So we bought that and went on into the concert. And You know, it was Friday and all the cars were blocking the road for like 10 miles. And so we just walked in and it was down in an amphitheater. And I always say I knew how Custer felt when he came over that hill and saw 3,000 Indians coming at him because we were there like by noon on Friday and there was at least 250 people, 250,000 people already there. And it was just mind boggling to walk into this farm and there's 250 people there at the 200,000, it's just kind of like, well, what do we do now? And there wasn't really any much food or much water. Nobody had bottled water back then.
Right.
And so you're just kind of on your own. And we had to make a Cheetos and a six pack go pretty far. And I'll tell you, the was much better than really being there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It just pretty much rained the whole time. And I remember we went to sleep and woke up the next morning, and I think I'd slept right where a little wet weather stream ran by, and I was just soaking wet. My sleeping bag was soaking wet. And it's like, oh, this is fun.
What's the most memorable act that you saw there?
Getting out of there.
Yeah, I can imagine that was fun.
Yeah, that was how do I get out of here? But you know, it was more like you heard them than saw them. But 250,000 were already there,
Yeah.
and so of course they were all right near the stage. So where we were, you could hear them, but you really couldn't see them. Or if you saw them, they were smaller than ants. So,
Right.
and I had been to Atlanta Pop Festival about 2 months before, which was really a good festival. There was like 100,000 people there. It was in a racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I saw Led Zeppelin and Creedence Clearwater, all these amazing bands, because on that festival, it was run a lot smoother than the Woodstock one and the weather was good. But it was a totally different experience. And they had food, they had places you could buy food and everything else. So we thought it was going to be like that. And it was.
Surprise.
But the funny thing is, I was born in Woodstock, New York. Yeah, and I think that really is what started me being a creative person because it was the place where the Hudson Valley painters came from, and
Yeah.
I would go to somebody's house and they'd be working on a big painting, or I'd go to somebody's house and they'd written a book and they're like, "You want me to autograph this book to you?" And actors would come up from New York City. You just see them walking around this little town of 1,500 people. And I mean, it really hasn't changed. I took my wife up there 3 or 4 years ago, right before COVID, and it was like, this is the same town, even though Bob Dylan was living there by that time and the band was living there. And
Yeah.
it, it was, it was an interesting time.
I have been there. It's a pretty funky place.
Yeah, it's still a pretty funky place. I think the COVID thing helped them because people wanted to move out of New York City. So the housing prices in that whole Hudson Valley doubled within 1 year. So it may be funky, but you got to have a lot of money to be funky.
Oh, I know. I'm actually from there. I mean, I grew up in the Hudson Valley and, Poughkeepsie and, those kinds of places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad worked for IBM. And so he worked in Kingston and Poughkeepsie.
Oh, okay.
And back then, IBM stood for I've been moved. So we moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and that's where I kind of spent my middle years. But we were like New York hillbillies. We would go back to Woodstock every year on vacation. We wouldn't go to the beach or anything else. We'd go home and see all the relatives and stuff. And so it always had a place in my heart because I was there every summer. I kind of grew up there, and it was a totally different world from Lexington, Kentucky. And as you know, and so it was one of those things that just had a big impact on me.
Yeah, it's certainly I think it's someplace that you have to see, right?
Yes.
You don't quite
It's,
get it until you go there.
yeah, because there's all these little towns, but they really are beautiful right there on the Hudson. And
Right.
my wife and I flew into New York, and we took the train up to Kingston and
Mm-hmm.
rented a car and drove all around. And we went to Albany. John Hyatt was playing there with Sonny Landreth, and they're two of my favorite people. And so we got to go to, it looks like a mushroom. It's an amphitheater there, but it's a mushroom looking thing. And so that was pretty cool. Just seeing places where I'd been, but 30 years later or whatever.
Yeah, that's funny. So, are you touring in support of this album, or I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing like I did the 2 shows at the Bluebird. I'm
yeah.
doing a show with Parties Guys next week, doing another show at the Listening Room the next week, then a place in Franklin after that. And then I kind of start hitting the road and going down to Florida, going to Minneapolis, just wherever they'll have me, getting out there and talking about the record. And it's pretty cool.
Hey, Kat, one more question, and then we're gonna let him go because he's got cooking to do. I hear.
I got cooking to do.
Their birthday celebration. So my last question is, of the 11 songs on the album, do you have a personal favorite? And if so, what makes it the favorite?
Well, that's kind of like saying, which of your children do you like the most? Or which
Yeah.
which one of the 3 dogs that you have are your favorite dog? It kind of varies. I still ride around sometimes and listen to it just for pointers on production and different sounds that could have been done because we do them pretty quick. But it's just on any given day, some things hit me more than others, and sometimes I still get emotional listening to 2 or 3 of the songs that are on there. And when I'm playing them live, like "Still My Only Child" and "This One's for You," "Feeling Alive Again," I think the one big love is maybe my favorite because it's such an up-tempo happy song that really embellishes what my wife is to me and to so many people that know her. And so I think that ends up turning around being my favorite. But then I listened to For a Minute there and the heart and soul that went into what those guys in Brazil did, and that I got to write it with Garth, and it's about our dads. And so, it's on any given day, it's something different.
Yeah. Well, I think this is very fascinating. And, whether someone's a songwriter or however they do it, I think that just revisiting your life so far is a good idea.
Yeah, I think it is for anybody. It's one of those things. Even like when I came to Nashville, everybody tells you how you're supposed to write songs and you're supposed to co-write with people and all these different things that are kind of different from the way you were doing it before you moved. And what I would do every few years is I would take like a month or two and just go back and remember what it was like before I moved to Nashville and how I wrote and what I was listening to and what inspired me. And then I could bring that back to the present with the people that I was working with there at that time and bring a little bit of me from the past into the future. And I always found that was a pretty cool thing to do.
Well, I just love this. I can't wait to listen to it and hear all the songs. Now that I know the backstories, it'll be even more special. But this is great. And I really appreciate you being our guest today.
Well, I appreciate all you do for songwriters and artists like me that are just we've got backstories to tell and we're getting to get out there and maybe somebody will hear us that wouldn't have heard us any other way. So we are in gratitude for what you guys do.
Well, thank you very
Yay.
much. We appreciate that. Come back and see us anytime. Please wish.
Yeah, you never know.
Go
I
ahead.
may have a new record quicker than I thought.
There you go. Well,
You might, inspire me to do another record.
well,
Yeah.
I hope that's true. Please say happy birthday to your wife for us.
I sure will.
And
Hopefully she'll be getting home in just a little bit, and I will tell her we had a great time, and we're going to celebrate because we got to do this radio interview.
all right, cool. Sounds good. You take care
All
of
right.
yourself.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, take care. Thank you.
All right.